I just got home from a cafe, my usual spot that also doubles up as a co-working space sometimes. People come and go with their routines, their laptops and their lives. This morning, a gentleman, I don't know, a stranger, walks up to me, older, matured, no weird energy, asked me if I come here often and that he had seen me around. I said yes, but may I know the reason why you asked this question to know where this conversation is leading? And he said, do you happen to know this person? He opened his mobile screen and he handed over the mobile phone to me to show the picture. Maybe you know this guy. He used to sit here. And I'm wondering, lots of things are going on in my mind. Is he warning me about a person? Has something happened? Has something taken place? Very many questions left open. The depiction is that this guy has a salt and pepper look, beard, big over the ear headphones. That's how I remembered him. So it took me a while to match that image with the person's image that I'm seeing on the mobile screen. And I had seen him often enough sitting at the corner table, head down, working with a gentle smile or walking about in the cafe. And under the photo was his name. And I noticed a date, a dash, and another date. I was like, wait, is this an obituary? Said, yeah, passed away 2 weeks ago, heart attack. No history, nothing, not even smoking. He was there a day before. The gentleman said I just thought I'd let you know since you come here often, maybe you might have known him or in some capacity, you might have interacted with him. So I thought I'll just let you know. I said, thank you for letting me know, but it's very unfortunate to learn about him like this. And I was literally rattled. I didn't know how to respond to this news. And he trailed off. Now the interaction stayed with me for a while. I even inquired about this with the barista staff, got more details about it. I want to share something very profound with this incident. Not because of what was said, but because of what was underneath that grief. Grief has its own nervous system. And I could clearly see the picture of this grief traveling in different capacities already in that surrounding, including this gentleman I spoke to. I'll tell you the details about it later, including the staff that he was able to interact with. He was a very generous guy, a very affectionate guy. He had helped a lot of people there, had even hired some people I got to know. And he was gone. But there was something alive in that ecosystem already about the impression of this person. Grief moves through people, through spaces, through strangers, in cafes, who have no particular reason to tell you something except that they need to put it somewhere. And can I say that I did not go through any emotion after I heard this, or did I just dismiss it? No, it was something that I could not make sense of because I don't know this person enough. But I can't say that I wasn't even affected at all in the least way. It just felt like this person who was present here a few weeks ago was just gone. And so many times it has happened that we have seen some people regularly in a cafe and sometimes we don't see them after a couple of weeks. And we may wonder sometime later, some years later, hey, I didn't see that person for a long time. God knows what happened. Maybe he moved cities, maybe she got married and she changed a job, or I don't know. We don't consider this option that this person does not exist anymore. And that creates a profound sense of sadness, grief, but an inescapable truth. When somebody is removed from life just like that. So we're going to unpack this from different lenses. Grief have a whole ecosystem, in my opinion. And today I just happen to be a small part of it, which is what today's episode about. My beautiful people, I am Mayuri, and you're listening to Aligned Hearts. Today wasn't a planned episode. This happened this morning, and I'm recording it the same day because that's the only way on this can make sense while it's still sitting with me. What I want to do today is unpack something that most of us have experienced but rarely examined: the news of someone's death. And I don't just mean someone close to us, I mean the whole spectrum. A stranger, an acquaintance, someone whose face you knew but whose name you didn't. And how each of those instances, circumstances land differently. Socially, personally, in the body. Because what moments like this do quietly, without asking your permission, is shift your gaze inward. We all know death is real. We know it's coming for all of us, but we tend to hold that knowledge at the edge of our vision, peripherally. And then something like this happens and suddenly it's right in front of you. And perhaps that's the scary part of it, which is why it's not so openly spoken about or debated about or felt in its myriad emotions. But that focal shift, that's what I want to sit with today, with you. We will look at it through some aspects of neuroscience to know how our brain chemistry operates, through psychology to understand how mind grapples with it, and finally through my soul solution, my whole integrated solution, ancient Indian scriptures, and through some philosophy that I think cuts closer to the truth than most self-help ever will. If this resonates with you, stay till the end. We will try and bring it somewhere useful. Not a grand resolution, not something that is like a goal. Just a small shift, something you can actually carry out of this episode. So what is grief actually at its most fundamental level? Neuroscience has a very specific answer. When someone dies, especially suddenly, without warning, the brain's anterior cingulate cortex activates. That's the same region that processes your physical pain. Not similar to physical pain, the same region. So when people describe a heaviness in the chest after loss, they're not being poetic. They're not just being dramatic or emotional that can be just shaken off. They are being anatomically accurate. And then there is what happens in the reward circuitry. Attachment is built in the dopamine pathways. Your brain had been registering someone's presence, even a person you never spoke to, even someone you just saw regularly across a room, as a small, consistent signal, pattern recognized. Okay. Now, this is how the world appears. And then one day that signal stops and the system keeps reaching for something that isn't there anymore. So neurologically, that looks a lot like withdrawal. There's a term in psychology for grief that doesn't get social recognition: disenfranchised grief. A colleague, a neighbor, the person you saw every week at the same cafe table. No rituals for it. Nobody checks on you. It doesn't have a name in polite conversation. But the anterior cingulate cortex doesn't verify your relationship status before it responds. Roland, Barthes, much as I can recall, wrote something in his book Camera Lucida, a book he wrote processing his mother's death through photographs, about what he called the punctum. The detail in a photo that pierces you. Not the general image, not the context, that one specific thing that gets through your defenses and lands and just hits you. That photo this morning had a punctum for this gentleman who showed it to me. For me, it was the headphones, because maybe when I saw this guy passing by so many number of times, I always wonder, oh, this guy has this big over-the-ear headphones, he's talking all the time. That was his association for me. And that's it. That's how I recognized just that signal was broken, that this person is not there anymore. For him, it was the gentleman who shared it with me. It was something deeper, of course, because he had known him personally. And I would compare the intensity of it. Barthes said, to love someone is to acknowledge they could be lost, which means the inverse is also true. Grief is that kind of attention, acknowledgement of something that flows through all of us as a network of love. And this love doesn't have any particular relationship. It doesn't have to be a label, a tag. It's just, I think it's on continuum felt, especially when it doesn't have any goal, any label. It's just a profound oneness with everything in your ecosystem. Grief is actually, in Barthes' words, is love that has nowhere to go. And it finds somewhere. It walks up to a stranger in a cafe and opens a screen. Derrida spent a lot of time thinking about absence. He called it the trace, the idea that every presence carries within it the mark of its own potential disappearance. I'm going to say it again. The idea that every presence carries within it some mark of its own potential disappearance. Every time you see someone, some part of your awareness registers that you might not always, most of the time. We don't let that register consciously. And then one day, a photo with a dash in it makes it very, very conscious. Alan Watts said something that always cuts through the noise for me. This is it. Not eventually, not after you figured things out. This, the coffee, the cafe, the stranger, the headphones, the unremarkable morning. This is it. He wasn't being casual about it. He was pointing at something most of us spend a lifetime sidestepping. It's about this inevitability of passing. And how our whole consciousness, our awareness as a system tries to find meanings, textures, labels, tags, justifiability, unjustifiability, but doesn't really look upon that holistically. Because for me, it's like it has its own central nervous system. Every person has a central nervous system of his presence. If you look at those impressions you create, you understand the power of this vital force we carry, and we take it so much for granted. To reference some of the Indian texts, ancient Indian texts, which usually helps us go deeper, I tend to recall this second chapter, if I'm not mistaken, of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna speaking to Arjuna on the battlefield. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah ajo nityah shashvato ayam purano Nahanyate nahanyamane sharir. The soul is never born, never dies. It doesn't cease to exist when the body does. Now, before anyone hears this as a reason to not feel the grief, just to bypass it, that's not what's happening in the text either. Arjuna is standing on a battlefield, unable to move, paralyzed. Look at the situation, look at the context. It's not a preaching, it's a life lesson which is transmitted in the heat of that very moment of that reality, which is why it's so powerful. Krishna is not telling him not to feel. He's giving him a frame large enough to hold the feeling without being flattened by it. And somewhere, whether we like it or not, it gives us the courage. At least it gives me the courage. Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras is even more direct about the human side of this. Abhinivesha swarasavahi vidusho api tadharudaha abhinivesha swarasavahi. Vidusho api tatha rudhaha. This clinging to life, the fear of death, runs even in the wise, even in amongst the erudites, amongst the people who you consider very saintly. This is the fifth klesha, or the conflict, or the crisis. Patanjali is not asking anybody to transcend it or pretend it's not there. He's saying, see it. Recognize that this fear is operating underneath almost every significant choice you make. Your ambitions, your relationships, the things you keep putting off, the conversations you haven't had yet. Once you actually see it, you make different choices, not fearless ones. You make different choices despite the fear, honestly, more honest ones. And then the concept of the samskara, the impressions we leave in the fabric of consciousness. Every presence that has lived through leaves some fragrance, some impression. Every person who walked through that cafe, every morning that man sat in the corner with his big over-the-ear headphones, those big headphones, those are very denotative impressions. They don't require depth of the relationship. They just require that you were real, that you showed up, that someone's nervous system registered you as a part of the world. It's as basic as that. The man with that headphone left samskaras in people who never knew his name. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. Before I wrap this up, I want to tell you what I did after all of this. I went back to that gentleman who had walked up to me. There is a reason why I did that, because in the process of whatever I understood what was happening, I knew that it wasn't random that he came up to me. It was actually a message in itself. What he did, that communication was actually not a communication, not to reach out anybody. It's just grief. Grief makes you do things like this. It has its own language. It doesn't always have to come in the form of tears or words that make complete sense. Sometimes it walks up to a near stranger and opens a screen. Sometimes it trails off mid-sentence and it's asking for the simplest thing, just someone to receive it. That's all. So I went and had a chat. We had a conversation, got to know more about it. And I acknowledged his grief, that it's going to take time. It's going to take its own journey. So be that person when something like this shows up. You don't need context. You don't need history. You just need to be present enough to receive it. And the bigger thing, the thing I have been sitting with since I got home, we rush, we defer, we tell ourselves the important things can wait, the call, the coffee, the checking in. And meanwhile, there are people who also are so stressed, including me. I have stressed over some of the insignificant things. So in that way, it's also a relief. There is nothing important, so important after all in life. I think the only thing that is really important is to know ourselves deeply enough to know who we are. And we keep filling up that space with different types of identities because we don't know who we are. And when death knocks the door, all these important things, the most important meeting you were rehearsing for, preparing for in the middle of 3 a.m. with your teams, the plan that was giving you a heartache, the insurmountable suffering that you were enduring, everything is temporary. There's always something more potent that can take away everything in a jiff. And that inevitable thing is death. I think to know what it is, we need to delve deeper into some stories of Upanishads, which I perhaps will talk about some other time. An interesting take on the death. I think it's essential. So make your life count for yourself to begin with, because ultimately those impressions that you leave behind are for the other people to pick on, but you're not there to live it. You're an association. So it's a relief, as I said earlier, know what really matters to you most profoundly is to know yourself deeper. And we know ourselves the deepest with our confirmation that yes, this is a life that can get over any time. That's it for now. This cafe story, what happened in the morning. What would it look like if you lived just today as if you actually believed that? And as a genuine wish for the man with the headphones, for the gentleman who carries him, and for whoever is listening to this right now, I really wish, let there be ease, let there be peace. That's where I'll leave it today, not with any answer, but with a better question than we started. Is something here stayed with you or unsettled you, which I'd honestly take as a better sign? Let me know. Follow Aligned Hearts wherever you listen. If this is the kind of thinking you want more of, leave a review. It helps more than you know.